And welcome to the Evidence Reasons Academy, and welcome to another exciting, riveting episode on science versus evolutionism. And today we'll be covering part 2 of a disagreement I had with Dr. Chris Thompson, who's a neuroscientist, and an individual that I debated two months ago, roughly, and who was gracious enough to have me on his channel, but we had very sharp disagreements, and the one that I'll be covering today is he has argued that evolutionism deserves a place alongside of electromagnetic theory in the pecking order of science, so to speak. That's my characterization. To be fair to Dr. Chris, I will just play a clip of the exchange, and then I'm going to take issue with what he said, and I'm going to defend my viewpoint. So let's go right to it. Let me flick a switch here and make sure I don't just totally disappear. All right, I'm still here. Okay, so I'm going to play Dr. Chris's clip. One moment. Let's see if I can get this working. Get this down. Molecular level. So the first question I'll ask, I quoted Dr. Coyne, who wrote the book Why Evolution is True. He said, in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to the pseudoscience of phrenology than to physics. And whether that's its intended meaning or not, I'd say I would agree with that on face value. Do you think that evolutionary biology holds a place along with theories like electromagnetic theory and physics?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Okay. And oh boy. All right. So you heard my characterization. Just to be fair to Dr. Chris, I let him speak in his own words there. So he thinks evolutionism holds a place alongside electromagnetic theory. In this episode, we're going to cover the history of electromagnetic theory, but let me just show you something that I think is a bit of an indictment on his claim. Since he's a neuroscientist, I'm sure he understands what I'm about to say. And I'm sorry to be so pointed because he's such a nice guy, but I have a responsibility since I'm a creationist whose avowed mission is to annihilate evolutionism. I'm going to have to be not so nice. So the first thing is cellular neuroscience. You cannot do cellular neuroscience without electromagnetic theory. You can do cellular neuroscience without mention of evolutionism. If you just say evolution did it, how is that different operationally? How will it change operationally how we understand a neuron or a cell a nerve cell also called a neuron? You cannot understand the operation of a neuron, a nerve cell, without the language and the mindset of electromagnetic theory. You can understand it without evolutionism. So right there in his own field, I'm going to show a little bit of this. So just to introduce maybe the topic, I have a graphic I'm ready to show. I had queued up, but let me just show a nerve cell, neuron. So not every creature has neurons. Humans have neurons that enables us to sense, to smell, to think, to feel, to taste, to hear, to see. And there are a variety of neurons. There's so many kinds and classes of neurons. This brings up a lot of evolutionary problems, but let's just show a nerve cell here. See if I can, I'm sorry, here's a nerve cell, and the parallel to an electronic circuit becomes obvious the more we study this. There are exchanges of electrical signals, ions, etc. So I think here is a picture of two nerve cells. We have things called dendrites in the cell, and then we have an axon. So we have a dendrite and an axon. A nerve signal is transmitted through the axon, and the dendrite picks up signals, I think, or generates them. Picks it up and generates it here. Really not generates them, but it gets collected here, and then the signal can be transmitted across the axon. My wording is not exactly correct. Maybe just to cover myself, let's look at the word what a dendrite is, just for the just so I don't botch this up. A dendrite. Dendrites are appendages that are designed. Oh, I love that word. Designed! It's more important to say it's designed rather than evolved. Just need to point that out. Dendrites, and this is from Science Direct. Dendrites are appendages that are designed. If they added the word intelligently designed, that would even be better. Dendrites are appendages that are intelligently designed to receive communications from other cells. They resemble a tree-like structure, forming projections that become stimulated by other neurons and conduct the electrochemical charge to the cell body, or more rarely directly to the axons. Okay, so electrochemical charge to the cell body, or more rarely directly to the axons. And let me look at a sensory neuron, because sensory neurons are the nerve cells that are activated by sensory input from the environment. For example, when you touch a hot surface with your fingertips, the sensory neurons will be the ones firing and sending signals off to the rest of the nervous system. So let me see if they have a sensory neuron. Okay, so they call it a sensory receptor. Okay, so that's not a dendrite. So I stand corrected. So you have dendrites, and then you have sensory receptors. Yeah, this is basic neurophysiology. It's been a while. So you have dendrite, cell body, axon. In a sensory neuron, you have something here. I don't quite understand that. Sensory receptor. Let's see. Sensory. See if there's a distinction. Sensory receptors are dendrites. Oh, okay. I learned something. Sensory receptors are dendrites of sensory neurons specialized for receiving specific kinds of stimuli. Okay. I just needed, I feel bad if I mistaught something. So a dendrite can receive a signal from another nerve cell, or it can be a sensory receptor. So there are a variety of dendrites. Okay. And so typically you have the dendrite receiving a signal, and in a sense it has to generate a corresponding signal that gets in here. Receiving and generating, okay, there's probably some semantics there, but so let's say it receives a signal and travels along the dendrite. If it's a sensory receptor, it basically has to transduce whatever it sensed into a signal. In that sense, it generates it. Okay, so we're splitting here semantically here, but the idea is, a signal comes in through the dendrite into the cell body, and it then travels out the axon, and then it can reach another nerve cell. So this process is how you hear something, it goes into your brain and you recognize it, etc. Or touch something, you can feel it, it gets processed through your brain. It's a very elaborate process. Now, what I described, how much evolutionism do you need to understand what was described? Like 0? Now that I described the neuron, did you know, since this resembles a lot like an engineer would recognize the conduction of signals, it looks very much like an electric circuit. And lo and behold, we can model properly the neuron as an electrical circuit. And in fact, from the Journal of Neurophysiology, 2006, and credit to the authors Canavier and Landry, they have here, let's see if I can make this bigger. They have here what definitely looks like a circuit diagram with maybe some non-traditional circuit symbols. So I have a degree in electrical engineering, so I recognize some of this. This here is a voltage source. This is a capacitor. This is a resistor. This is a switch here. So you have a capacitor. So let me just show what the man-made capacitors look like. So Michael Faraday, who we talked about in some shows, we measure the unit of capacitance of a capacitor is named after Michael Faraday. I believe he also, in addition to making a generator, he probably built some of the first capacitors. So these are capacitors, and you will see them in electrical circuits, and the symbol are these 2 bars like that. So I'm just showing how to read an electrical diagram. Now, where am I headed with this? And I'm just going to be kind of like beating a dead horse here. This is the language of electromagnetic theory. Capacitance is an electromagnetic concept. Resistance is an electromagnetic concept. So capacitor can be charged up. It is not exactly like a battery, but it can be charged. When you can charge it up, there's I think it's called a displacement current can quote unquote flow as the capacitor is charged with electrical energy, and it basically once it gets fully charged, it resists direct current. It'll pass alternating currents. A resistor basically is kind of like a valve, it constricts the amount of current, the number of electrons and ions that can flow. A switch prevents the flow of electrical current. Here, let me go here. This symbol with the long bar and the short bar is a battery. So we have these symbols of batteries, electric, schematic, symbol, battery. And so the long, let me just show this here. And this is a complex, let me see if I can get a simpler one. Okay, this is better. The long bar is the positive, and the short bar is negative. That's the convention in electrical engineering. So already the moral of the story, you're not going to understand the operation of of the nervous system at the cellular level, what we call cellular neuroscience, unless you have the language of electrical engineering. Electrical engineering, not evolutionism. You need electrical engineering concepts the language of electrical engineering to understand the design of the neuron, the intelligent design of the neuron, dare I say. You don't need evolutionism for that. So how does this, even in Dr. Chris's own field, where he's claiming that evolutionism is right up there with electromagnetic theory, here's proof. Here is my argument. He was just saying, that's just your opinion, Sal. And I'm giving you facts here. You will not understand cellular neuroscience without understanding these basic concepts that are foundational to electromagnetic theory. So right there, I feel I've totally negated his claim that it was just my opinion. We cannot do neuroscience without electromagnetic theory. There you go. You can do neuroscience without evolutionism. Absolutely. There's proof positive right there in a journal of neurophysiology. And let's just keep beating the dead horse here, baby. So here is the equivalent of a battery. Right? The reason they represent it as a battery is it's some sort of voltage. So you can just say there's a voltage here. And that's, through chemical physiological means. And then there's a voltage here. And when you see this here, this squiggly line, okay, the squiggly line is, okay, you have a squiggly line here, that's a resistor. When you have a squiggly line with an arrow, that is a variable resistor. And just to show, because I was a student of electrical engineering, that's why it's so helpful to have had a background in it, because to help me understand neuroscience. My study of electrical engineering made it easier to understand cellular neuroscience. Evolutionism did squat for my understanding of the operation of neurons and cellular neuroscience. So try doing neuroscience without the basics of electromagnetic theory and using the language of electrical engineers. Try finding what you can substitute with evolutionism to help you understand these concepts of voltage, current, resistance, capacitance. It's not going to work. Those are in the domain of electromagnetic theory, not evolutionism. So, schematic symbols. Let's see, resistor. Okay, so the resistor, the schematic symbol is that squiggly line, as I said. That's the schematic. You can get that from Wikipedia. And let's do the schematic symbol variable resistor. Okay, I'm just showing off here that I actually know what I'm talking about. See, that's the schematic variable resistor symbol. There it is. Okay, people keep saying I don't know what I'm talking about. That's why I want to show you on Wikipedia. It's confirming that I know what I'm talking about if I say I know what I'm talking about. This is so easy. At the very least, I can claim I know what I'm talking about because I read it on Wikipedia. All right. But yeah, I did have an electrical engineering background. That is one of my diplomas up there, dare I say. And contrary to the claims of a certain Nathan Ormond, I actually did study this. Anyway, so this is electrical engineering. Capacitor, resistor, switch. Okay, so this is a battery. Okay, so let's look at the diagram, the schematic for a switch. All right. Schematic symbol switch. There you go. Did I tell you? I told you I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about when I said that. How are you going to understand this diagram? Where in evolutionism are you going to learn what this diagram means and its significance in the scheme of a nerve cell? So, capacitor, resistor, variable resistor, battery or voltage source, switch. E normally symbolizes voltage. That's just a convention because V usually is velocity. The physicists wanted to give a different symbol, so they used E, which is kind of like energy or electricity. I don't know. E. I, they decided to use for current. Current. So there's voltage and current. Those are electromagnetic theory concepts. You cannot understand cellular neuroscience without electromagnetic theory concepts. You cannot substitute evolutionism because there's no terms, there's no understanding of electromagnetism in evolutionism as far as this goes. I mean, at the root of evolutionism, you can't start from the first principles of evolutionism and generate electromagnetic theory. It doesn't work that way. So, right there, even at the very basis of understanding neuroscience, you need electrical engineering, which proceeds from electromagnetic theory. So I'm just sharply disagreeing that evolutionism has a place beside electromagnetic theory in science's pecking order. I would say Jerry Coyne was absolutely right when he said, in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to the pseudoscience of phrenology than to physics. There you go. Now, there's some non-standard symbols in this that I had to kind of guess what they mean. By the way, these little circles here are just, you don't necessarily need them. They may be places where you can put a little measuring device. You don't need them. They may just be like connection points. And the lines are, you can model them as conductors, but in a cell you don't need that. So this thing, I looked in the circuit diagrams because I know these symbols, but this one was like, what is that? And I believe they invented a symbol for a ion pump. So this is a calcium pump and this is a sodium pump. This is the symbol I is the current going through a calcium pump there and a sodium pump here. I believe these are for the various kinds of potassium channels, I think. We'll see. Now a little comment. Okay, so what is current? All right, so when you have a pipe, you can have a lot of water flow through it. If you have a bigger pipe, you have more water flow. So you can imagine resistance as being like the higher the resistance, the smaller your pipe. Okay, this is just by analogy here. So when you're pumping more molecules of water through the pipe, that's analogous to pumping more electrons or ions through a wire or a channel. And we measure the amount of current. You know, just like we can measure water flow in the number of molecules per second coming, going through a cross section of the pipe, the molecules per second. You can measure current in terms of the number of electrons or ions per second. Now, there are various ways of counting this, and the unit they use is coulombs. So, and for historical purposes, a coulomb has some quirks. A coulomb, okay, so let's just go to Wikipedia here. A coulomb is 5 times 10 to the 18th divided by 0.801088317 elementary charges. It's about 6.2415.09 times 10 to the 18th electrons. So let's see if they moles per coulomb. See if that's even possible. The Faraday constant represents the amount of electric charge carried by 1 mole, or Avogadro's number of electrons. It's an important constant in chemistry, physics, and electronics, and is commonly symbolized by the italic uppercase F. It is expressed in coulombs per mole. Holy smokes. And there's this whole thing counting coulombs, moles, and joules. Ugh. Okay. Well, just suffice to say, if you can count 10 to the 18th electrons, you can count a coulomb. And there is Charles Augustin de Coulomb. And when Charles Augustin de Coulomb? 1736 to 1806. So you need coulombs per second equals amperes. So basically the number of charges per second crossing crossing some threshold, all right, or a cross section, passing through a cross section or going past a threshold. Amperes. So you got amperes. Volts is a little bit more complicated. They call it a potential difference. What that means is like, okay, so when I have an object here, let's say it's resting at one point, the higher that it goes up, the more potential difference. Because, if you drop something from a low height, it doesn't reach a velocity as high as if you drop it from a higher height. See, when I drop it from a higher height, it accelerates, gets a higher velocity. 1/2 mass times velocity squared is equal to the kinetic energy. So one way you can, okay, this is kind of colloquial, it's not the most rigorous, but one way you can describe potential energy is the amount of kinetic energy that it can be converted to. That's not really the best definition, okay? So when you have a big potential difference, you can then get the electrons, the average velocity of the electron, average velocity, is going to be higher. And it will, and when it's higher, using that 1/2 mv squared, you can kind of get, you can translate that into volts. It's a little bit difficult to do that. Volts are defined as joules per coulomb. Okay, a joule, you can measure energy in terms of joules. A joule is equal to a watt second. Okay, so I'm just trying to relate this to some terms. When you get your electric bill, they say the number of kilowatt hours. You can also convert it to kilowatt seconds or watt seconds. A watt second is a joule. A joule of energy, it is a Newton meter. Okay, a Newton is kilogram meters per second squared. Okay, this is getting pretty complicated when all the units. But basically, it corresponds. It's not the same. It corresponds to the average velocity of the electron. And if any physicists are out there that have objections, please feel free to correct it in the comment section. That's just the best that I could do. So if you have amperes that don't have really energetic electrons, then that means there's less power there. But if you have very energetic electrons, because there's high voltage, a high potential difference. So when you have a high potential difference, you're accelerating the electrons very fast versus just a little bit as it crosses the potential difference. So remember, potential difference measured in joules per coulomb. Joules per coulomb. Volts or joules per coulomb. Let me just check that. A volt. Let's look at the SI unit. Hi, Bread of Life. Hi, Jamie Russell. Hi, Jamie Russell. And hi, Rebecca Davis. And here I'm just assailing Dr. Chris's statement that evolutionism holds a place with electromagnetic theory by actually going to neurophysiology journals and showing you cannot understand neurophysiology without electromagnetic theory. And my proof of that is an example right here. This is an electrical schematic that describes the neuron, its electrical properties. You cannot understand neuroscience at the cellular level without understanding concepts from electromagnetic theory. This would be a disaster. Oh, and Janet Duttridge is here. God bless you. You're in our prayers, dear sister. And when she's here, let me say a prayer for her right now. Dear Lord, please be with Janet. Please be with her family. I know that there's been an accident recently. Please heal her beloved relative. And thank you for Janet. She's a widow and she has health needs. Be with her, provide her, and strengthen her. We invite you, Lord. We plead miracles in Janet's life. In Jesus' name, amen. You know, whatever I say pales in comparison to what the Lord does. It's so important to pray. God bless you. Thanks for joining. So, I can't believe there's 6 people viewing. God bless you all. So, I was just saying, Dr. Chris, you can't get away. I can't let you get away with saying, oh, evolutionism deserves a place right along electromagnetic theory in science. And one of his justifications was the number of departments in all the universities that are studying evolutionary biology. I mean, does this make postmodernism and all the philosophy departments, does that make it a valid field of study? Postmodernism is garbage. It is antithetical to science. And yet you have all of these departments, maybe not named postmodernism departments, but you have all of these departments where it's like philosophy or the humanities or whatever, where it has found a home. It doesn't make it right. The measure of the veracity, the value, the truthfulness of a scientific idea is experiment and observation and utility. And evolutionism has none of that. So, for a neuroscientist to put it at the same evolutionism at the same level of electromagnetism, I have to point out I don't think that makes sense. And I'm demonstrating it right here by showing the applicability of electromagnetic theory in the form of electrical engineering circuit diagrams that describe the nerve cell. You cannot understand, you cannot describe, much less understand the operation of a nerve cell without the language of electromagnetic theory. Ideas like volts, amperes, ohms, farads. Just doesn't make sense. You need coulombs. I mean, come on. And the idea of charge, even something as basic as electric charge. These are the bedrocks. These are the fundamentals of electromagnetic theory. And this is my argument. In science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to the pseudoscience of phrenology than to physics. I'm showing what great physical theories are, like electromagnetic theory. Another good one is quantum mechanics, but that's also kind of hard. But even lesser theories of physics, like classical mechanics, celestial mechanics, statistical mechanics, and thermodynamics, relativity. Even geometric optics has better experimental confirmation than evolutionary biology. So yeah, people were saying all these videos. Well, I had a busy week because of the holidays, and then I've been doing all sorts of stuff. I just had it in me. I needed to do a lot of videos. I said I'm going to postpone it because I have urgent matters. I had to meet with lots of people this week, and sometimes I was really tired, but I had to have these conferences, etc. And I kept the queue of all these shows I wanted to do just started piling up, and Saturday is a day to unload, to absolutely unload. And there's yet another show tonight. I'm going to be teaching molecular biology to Cindy Lincoln, and then tomorrow, a riveting episode with retired Navy SEAL Sandy Pigeon. We're going to talk about military science and history. We're going to shoot the breeze and play armchair field marshal. So, and Bread of Life says, Rebecca, so great to see you again. She's been in both my streams. She says, and we don't need evolution to explain nerve cells. In fact, we can't explain the origin of nerve cells by natural processes. Oh, yeah. I mean, what's the difference operationally if you say evolution did it or God did it? I mean, at least in terms of understanding how the nerve cell is connected one part to another, you know, as some of the kids' songs go, you know, the tailbone's connected to this bone, or I used to be able to sing it. So understanding the parts and what the parts do and how they connect and how they relate. See, that's independent of evolutionism. And to be brutally honest, yes, it's also independent of creationism. There is a place for creationism and evolutionism. But for understanding the operation of the nerve cell, you need electromagnetic theory. And I don't know how Dr. Chris could be so persuaded in his mind that evolutionism is as good as electromagnetic theory, and he's a neuroscientist. He cannot prosecute his field without electromagnetic theory. And he related to me that he had a colleague that was an ID proponent who was also in neuroscience. So it goes to show there's an independence in neuroscience that's independent of your idea about origins. When you're talking about operational theories like this, when you talk about the operational theories, the way the cell operates, you have to use operational scientific disciplines like electromagnetic theory, not an origins theory. So operational theories deal generally with the present, or, you know, somewhere around that time frame. Origin theories deal with things in the past. They're different. So that's why I say electromagnetic theory takes precedence, and I think this is just a brutal example of why I'm right, and he was wrong to say it's just my opinion. Dr. Chris, you cannot do cellular neuroscience without electromagnetic theory. It is more than just my opinion. It is a brutal fact. And if you disbelieve me, try teaching neuroscience without using electromagnetic terms. Try finding replacements in evolutionism. And good luck with that. So now let me relate this diagram here. I had a picture of a nerve cell. So you could see the parts of, let me see if I could show this. So you see you have the dendrite here, and you have the dendrite here, and then you have this fluid surrounding the cell, and that's called the extracellular fluid. And then you have the intracellular fluid here, which is inside. And I need to know what the soma is. I'm embarrassed. I should know that. Soma. Oh, soma in biology. The soma, all living things, all living matter of an animal or a plant except the reproductive or germ cells. Soma. Okay, so that's a somatic cell, I guess. I don't know why they use the word soma. Anyway, you have the extracellular fluid which surrounds the cell, and you have the dendrites here. And then you're able to describe the electrical properties and model it with an electric circuit, just like an electrical engineer. I mean, it's gotta hurt evolutionary biologists' feelings that electrical engineering concepts are more valuable to neuroscience than evolutionism. I mean, evolutionary biologists seem to just be desperately needing to make themselves relevant to modern science, even in biology. I mean, there's always been kind of a battle between engineers and evolutionary biologists, because a lot of the creationists of years gone by and even in the present day are engineers, and they say, just butt out, you don't know anything about biology. And I'm just going to say, oh yeah, really? Who do cellular neurobiologists consult? They use electrical engineering literature to understand the workings of a cell. And then these cells develop networks of nerve cells. And one of the biggest networks of nerve cells is the human brain. Do you think electrical engineers, there's an entire discipline of electrical engineering called network theory. And let me just, because guys keep saying, Sal, you don't know what you're talking about. I just showed off. I can read those circuit diagrams. I knew what the symbols meant. I understand the concepts. So don't say that. That's just kind of the slimy tactics of my critics. They'll just say I don't know it. What else are they going to say? Are they going to admit I actually know something? They don't want to admit that. So, network theory. And look what we find. Let's see. Oh boy, network theory. In electrical engineering, network theory is the study of how to solve circuit problems. Okay, so we have network theory. It's just got to hurt evolutionary biologists that they don't have relevance in such a critical, important field. The electrical engineers have more valuable skill sets for research teams in cellular neurobiology. And I happen to know that from personal experience. When I was a student at the FAAS graduate school at the National Institutes of Health, we had several lecturers teaching us neuroscience. One of my professors had no biology background, but he was a PhD in electrical engineering. No surprise there. He had the right skill set. And of the people teaching neuroscience, we had chemists, we had cellular physiologists, electrical engineers. The last skill set that was not represented was evolutionary biologists. You don't need them, and I've been trying to tell you that. They add nothing to science. They've been detrimental to science. They just should butt out, go to the philosophy and religion department, and let us study and sneer at them there. That's my feeling. So, that is most of my sermon today on the glory of electromagnetic theory. Plus, praise God, the founders, some of the major pioneers of electromagnetic theory were Christians. Devout Christians, most likely creationists, like James Clerk Maxwell and Michael Faraday, God rest his soul. And there are others like Joseph Henry. There are others. And I may be covering the testimonies of these Christian men. Contrast that with the anti-Christian Charles Darwin, who was an agnostic, but he disliked Christian theology. He thought it was repugnant to him. And, he wasn't a really good scientist. That's all a facade. His theory of unnatural selection is an utter failure. And it has hindered science, the advancement of it. It's falling apart as an idea, and it's had some philosophical consequences that have been detrimental to society. So electromagnetic theory has a rich history of Christians who were studying nature because nature is the works of God. Why would you not study the works of God? It says in the Psalms so many times, I will declare your works. I will declare your mighty works. If you're going to declare his works, it's great to study it, and then you can declare it. And Michael Faraday he underlined in his personal Bible, for since the creation of the world, his, that is God's, his invisible attributes, his divine nature and eternal power are clearly seen in the things that are made. His invisible attributes. The study of electromagnetism goes into the realms of the invisible. You cannot see electric fields directly. You cannot see magnetic fields directly. but you can probe it by the things that are seen. And that's what Michael Faraday did. I can understand why he would underline that verse in his personal Bible. Praise God that someone found his personal Bibles. He had 2 of them. He had copious notes. He had underlined it. He studied his Bible. He was so meticulous in doing that. He's just a great man. Excellence in every aspect of his life. He cared for the poor. On Judgment Day, when Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, Jesus will say, Michael Faraday, you fed me when I was hungry. You gave me drink when I was thirsty. You visited me when I was in prison. You cared for me when I was sick. That was Michael Faraday. But he was also a great researcher. We would not have the modern day. I've said this, there's no modern day without Faraday, because he created the electrical generator. He created the electrical motor. Without the electrical generator, we would not have the electricity that powers the internet, the light bulbs, the cameras, the cell phones, the radars, the spaceships, etc. The communication systems, that is. Without Faraday, there'd be no modern day. There'd be no modern day to be able to power the laboratories that do scientific research. And unfortunately, without Faraday, we would not have these internet trolls that promote Darwinism and atheism throughout the internet. But I guess that's the way it goes. So without Faraday, there would be no modern day. And praise God, he was a great man of God who loved the Lord with all his heart, mind, soul, and strength. He's an example for the Christian today who wishes to be in various fields other than being a pastor or missionary. You can be a great man of God by serving God, by being a researcher, studying the great works of God, and declaring them to the rest of the world, and saying there is a creator, that we didn't evolve by ourselves. Praise God. So, see, now I get really excited because today I was talking about defense science, military science, and electrical engineering. This is me in my element. So now I saved the worst for last. This is to put you all to sleep, and maybe it's Janet's nap time. So maybe I'll give 15 minutes of nap time. 15 minutes of nap time talks. Nerd torture here. The history of electromagnetic theory. And, history of electromagnetic theory. And again, I'll tell you something. Do you remember that passage where Tabitha died and all these women came to Peter and were crying and weeping? And what did they do? They took the clothes that Tabitha sold. She was a great woman of the Lord, and they showed them before Peter. This is such a beautiful passage. Let me just share this with you. It wasn't Tabitha. It was Tabitha. Tabitha. Acts chapter 9. I just want to share this. Acts. Let me bring it up here. My browser's misbehaving. All right, here it goes. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas. She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days she became ill and died, and when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, urging him, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter rose and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas made while she was with them. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. Turning to the body, he said, "Tabitha, arise." And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. Now, why did I cover this? This is beautiful that this woman is making dresses. Okay, I'm sorry to say this, but all right, as a guy, you don't take me to the close. I just thought I'm not going to appreciate someone's work. All right, you show me a gun that someone made, I'm just like, wow, yeah, that's really cool, you know. You show me a dress, I'm like, okay, haha. All right, so, but she died, and the widows had this outpouring of love, and they said, look, this is what she did. This is her life work. It's beautiful. This is what God gifted her. Do you see that this is precious to us? This represents her. This represents her life and what she's done. And they're showing it to the apostle. And it's an expression of what they loved and what she represented. Presented to the apostle. The apostle Peter had compassion. He says, Tabitha, arise, and she rises from the dead. Now the point of this, given that much of electromagnetic theory was developed by Christians, don't you see there's a parallel here. Like those dresses were to Tabitha Dorcas. Electromagnetic theory, the equations, the experiments, that's kind of like the work of these Christian men. So this is a very touching passage in the Bible where it says here, she was full of good works and acts of charity, but she also was a dressmaker. Michael Faraday was full of good works and acts of charity. And then he had science, just like Tabitha had dressmaking. So as I cover the history of electromagnetic theory, I have a new perspective now because I'm seeing things that the theories and ideas and experiments that they conducted with their love of the Lord. This is a product of their love of the Lord. No matter how boring it may seem to us today in the modern day, it is special in that they have left a memorial of their work to the Lord. So just as I might just look at a dress and go, haha, yeah. You look at it differently if it is a beloved saint in God's kingdom. It's like, wow, this was special. This is special because it was made with someone who loved the Lord with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength. Now it takes a different meaning. And I'm only saying that because this is going to be torturous. All right? So maybe look at it this way. And guys, especially us people who do research, the measure of the quality of our work, God says in the end, we judge by our works. Thank God that he's not going to judge it whether our work was entertaining and compelling or that he would judge it bad because it put people to sleep. He judges it based on, was this your living sacrifice to the Lord? Thank God that he will accept, whatever our wretched lives can give him. And it's precious in his sight. These are works that were ordained before the foundation of the world for us to do. And it uses the word poema, which is poem. So, that being said, let us now look a little bit at the history of electromagnetic theory. See what a real scientific discipline is versus evolutionary biology. So let's see. History of electromagnetic theory. And I'm not going to cover the whole thing. This is a massive article on Wikipedia. Oh my goodness, it is gigantic. History of electromagnetic theory. And I'm just going to scroll through so you could see just how okay, this is immense, guys. I want you to see how a real theory is put together. Maybe you can appreciate it. And if you study this history, you're going to compare it to evolutionism, and then you come back and tell me if you think evolutionism deserves a place alongside of electromagnetic theory in the sciences. It doesn't matter whether they have all these departments. That's not the measure of it. I mean, this is just a gigantic article. But I think just because I love nerd torture sessions, I might be having several episodes where I have to disagree with Dr. Chris about the quality of electromagnetic theory versus evolutionism. And this is just going to be delight. I know this is like spiking the football in the end zone, but I'm going to have a lot of fun. Because I studied electrical engineering. There's Albert Einstein, Dirac. Oh my goodness. Feynman. Oh, this, oh my goodness, this is just immense. And what do I have to say? I'd rather study this than waste my time debunking evolutionism. Electromagnetic theory describes the works of God. I'll declare the works of God even if it bores you to tears. Even if it bores you to tears, I'm going to declare the works of God. Amen, hallelujah, right? I mean, sometimes declaring the works of God can be kind of torturous for the audience. But we have discovered the structure that God has imposed on the universe through his laws. We're seeing the laws. And like a lot of legal documents, it can be boring and unexciting. But when you look back at the way the universe is designed and it's fine-tuned and how everything works, you see the genius, the mighty power. I mean, just think, as you go through this history, the minds that it took to understand it, then think of the mind that had to build it in the first place, that would devise it so elegantly. The people that understand that Maxwell's equations of electromagnetic theory just liken it to something so beautiful and sublime it is. I mean, it's hard to understand, but then when you see it, it's like, wow. So I'm going to just have to do this a paragraph at a time. This could be a 5-hour project, just reading through this. So maybe we could do just episodes of half an hour, 45 minutes at a time, because this is just a monstrosity. So I'll just do maybe a little bit, maybe 15 minutes, and then we'll call it a day. History of electromagnetic theory. The history of electromagnetic theory begins with ancient measures to understand atmospheric electricity, in particular lightning. People then had little understanding of electricity and were unable to explain the phenomenon. Scientific understanding into the nature of electricity grew throughout the 18th and 19th centuries through the work of researchers such as Coulomb, Ampere, Faraday, and Maxwell. Faraday and Maxwell were Christians, devout Christians. In the 19th century, it had become clear that electricity and magnetism were related, and their theories were unified. Wherever charges are in motion, electric current results, and magnetism is due to electric current. The source for electric field is electric charge, whereas that for magnetic field is electric current, charges in motion. Okay, let me just pause here. So you have an electron, and there's an electric field surrounding the electron. A magnetic field is generated when you have the electron moving. See, it says a magnetic field is electric current, charges in motion. So when you have an electron in motion, it creates a magnetic field. So that's just a little bit of it there. All right, so you have electric field, you have an electron or a proton, there's a electric field around it. When those things are in motion, it creates a magnetic field. Now, one may wonder, how does a permanent magnet, like your refrigerator magnets, work? Well, all the molecules are aligned in such a way that the electrons, as they're quote-unquote orbiting the nucleus, they're aligned in such a way is that their net motion is like an electric current. And it creates this sort of current that can generate the magnetic field. That's how come you have permanent magnets. And so let's just look at the table of contents. We have ancient and classical history, the Middle Ages, 17th century, 18th century, improving the electric machine, electrics and non-electrics, vitreous and Resinews, never heard of that. The Leyden jar, the late 18th century. The 19th century, the early 19th century. Faraday and Henry, the middle 19th century. Maxwell, the end of the 19th century, and then the second industrial revolution. And then the 20th century, Lorentz and Poincaré. I'd covered Poincaré. I covered Lorentz for like the last 8 weeks. Einstein, Annus Mirabilis, the mid-20th century. Parity violation electroweak theory. I may not get there. Even I haven't studied that. There's the 21st century, electromagnetic technologies, magnetic resonance, wireless electricity, unified theories, and open problems. Ancient and classical theory. The knowledge of static electricity dates back to the earliest civilizations, but for millennia it had remained merely an interesting and mystifying phenomenon, without a theory to explain its behavior, and it was often confused with magnetism. The ancients were acquainted with rather curious properties possessed by two minerals, amber, and the Greek word is electron, and magnetic iron ore, magnetis lithos, the magnesian stone, or lodestone. Amber, when rubbed, attracts lightweight objects such as feathers. Magnetic iron ore, and magnetic iron ore has the power of attracting iron. So this was the early parts. You could see the electric fields and magnetic fields. And again, these are invisible fields. And I could see why Faraday was saying, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, clearly seen by the things that are made. You could not see these invisible forces, but you knew they existed by their action on things you could see. And I understand why Faraday would underline that passage in Romans 1:20 in his Bible. This is beautiful. Beautiful. And then, so this is the beginning of electromagnetic theory. You have the electric field, the magnetic field, and it was centuries later that we began to see how they were intertwined, that they were related. Okay, so based on his find of an Olmec hematite artifact in Central America, the American astronomer John Carlson has suggested that the Olmec may have discovered and used the geomagnetic lodestone compass earlier than 1000 BC. If true, this predates the Chinese discovery of the geomagnetic lodestone compass by more than a millennium. Carlson speculates that the Olmecs may have used similar artifacts as a directional device for astrological or geomantic purposes, or to orient their temples, the dwellings of the living, or the interments of the dead. The earliest Chinese literature reference to magnetism lies in a 4th century BC book called the Book of the Devil Valley Master. The lodestone makes iron come, or it attracts it. So that was, I guess, the passage from the Chinese literature, 4th century BC, in the Book of the Devil. Here's a picture of the discovery of the property of magnets. Magnets were first found in a natural state. Certain iron oxides were discovered in various parts of the world, notably in Magnesia in Asia Minor, that had the property of attracting small pieces of iron, which is shown here. Okay. Long before any knowledge of electromagnetism existed, people were aware of the effects of electricity. Lightning and other manifestations of electricity, such as St. Elmo's fire, were known in ancient times, but it was not understood that these phenomena had a common origin. Ancient Egyptians were aware of shocks when interacting with electric fish, such as the electric catfish, or other animals, such as electric eels. Ouch. The shocks from animals were apparent to observers since prehistory, by a variety of peoples that came into contact with them. Texts from 2750 BC by the ancient Egyptians referred to these fish as thunderer of the Nile and saw them as the protectors of all the other fish. Actually, they're predators, but oh well. I'm sorry to laugh. Another possible approach to the discovery of the identity of lightning and electricity came from any other source, is to be attributed to the Arabs, who before the 15th century used the same Arabic word for lightning, bark, as the electric ray. Thales of Miletus, writing around 600 BC, noted that rubbing fur on various substances such as amber would cause them to attract specks of dust and other light objects. Thales wrote on the effect now known as static electricity. The Greeks noted that if they rubbed the amber for long enough, they could even get an electric spark to jump. These electrostatic phenomena were again reported millennia later by Roman and Arabic naturalists and physicians. Several ancient writers, such as Pliny the Elder and Scribonius Largus, attested to the numbing effects of electric shocks delivered by catfish and electric rays. Scribonius, I like that name, Scribonius. Pliny in his books writes, the ancient Tuscans by their learning hold that there are 9 gods that send forth lightning, and those of 11 sorts. This was in general the early pagan idea of lightning. The ancients held some concept that shocks could travel along conducting objects. Patients with ailments such as gout or headache were directed to touch electric fish in the hope that the powerful jolt might cure them. A number of objects found in Iraq in 1938 dated to the early centuries AD, Sassanid Mesopotamia, called the Baghdad Battery, resembles a galvanic cell and is believed by some to have been used for electroplating. And what is a galvanic cell? It's like a battery. That's a galvanic cell. All right. There's probably some nuance why it's called a galvanic cell versus a battery. Interesting. Okay. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Well, since I'm here, okay, the word battery has come to include a single galvanic cell. Okay. But a battery properly consists of multiple cells. All right. So a galvanic cell, so it's a battery called the Baghdad Battery. The claims are controversial because of the supporting evidence and the theories for the uses of the artifacts. Physical evidence on the objects conducive for electrical functions, and if they were electrical in nature. As a result, the nature of these objects is based on speculation, and the function of these artifacts remains in doubt. Magnetic attraction was once accounted for by Aristotle and Thales as the working of a soul in the stone. The working of a soul in the stone. The magnetic needle compass was developed in the 11th century. Okay, so the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The magnetic needle compass was developed in the 11th century, and it improved the accuracy of navigation by employing the astronomical concept of true north. And that was in the Dreampool Essays 1088. The Chinese scientist Shen Kuo, 1031 to 1095, was the first person known to write about the magnetic needle compass, and by the 12th century, Chinese were known to use the lodestone compass for navigation. In Europe, the first description of the compass and its use for navigation are of Alexander Neckham, 1187. Although the use of compasses was already common, its development in European history was due to Flavio Gioja from Amalfi. Alright, I'm a big history buff. I'm really loving this, guys. In the 13th century, Peter Peregrinus, a native of Mericourt in Picardy, conducted experiments on magnetism and wrote the first extant treatise describing the properties of magnets pivoting compass needles. In 1282, the properties of magnets and the dry compasses were discussed by Ashraf Umar II, a Yemeni scholar. The dry compass was invented around 1300 by Italian inventor Flavio Gioja. Archbishop Eustathius of Thessalonica, Greek scholar and writer of the 12th century, records that Walliver, king of the Goths, was able to draw sparks from his body. The same writer states that a certain philosopher was able, while dressing, to draw sparks from his clothes, a result seemingly akin to that obtained by Robert Simmer in his silk stocking experiments. A careful account may be found in the Philosophical Transactions, 1759. Italian physician Gerolamo Cardano wrote about electricity in Subtitlate, 1550, distinguishing perhaps for the first time between electrical and magnetic forces. I mean, okay, guys, please don't compare. Please don't say evolutionary theory is as good as electromagnetic theory. This is a rich history of experiment and observation, direct observation. And people say, well, evolution deals with stuff in the far past. It's like, yeah, okay. So don't equate it to being at the same level of things where we make observations in the present, or near present, where we have actual witnesses and we have recordings, handwritten recordings. And then, not to mention, we can replicate it. It's just in a different league, guys. Operational science takes precedence over origins theories as a matter of principle. And I know what's happening. Evolutionism wants to have the gravitas. It wants to have the authority of operational science. And that's just not going to happen as a matter of principle. But they want it so bad. They want to pretend they've understood things, that they figured it out, and it's just phony. It's just phony. And they've misled people that they have to thinking that they have figured it out when they haven't. And it looks like they're dead wrong. So, let me read about the 17th century, and then we will call it the end of this stream, and then continue on in part 3. 17th century. Toward the late 16th century, a physician of Queen Elizabeth's time, Dr. William Gilbert, in De Magneti, expanded on Cardano's work and invented the new Latin word electrica, from electron, the Greek word for amber. Gilbert, a native of Colchester, fellow of St. John's College, Cambridge, and sometime president of the College of Physicians, was one of the earliest and most distinguished English men of science, a man whose work Galileo thought enviably great. He was appointed court physician and granted a pension to set him free to continue his research in physics and chemistry. Gilbert undertook a number of careful electrical experiments, in the course of which he discovered that many substances other than amber, such as sulfur, wax, glass, etc., were capable of manifesting electrical properties. Gilbert also discovered that a heated body lost its electricity and that moisture prevented the electrification of all bodies, due to the now well-known fact that moisture impaired the insulation of such bodies. He also noticed that electrified substances attracted all other substances indiscriminately, whereas a magnet only attracted iron. The many discoveries of this nature earned for Gilbert the title of founder of the electrical science. By investigating the forces on a light metallic needle balanced on a point, he extended the list of electric bodies and found also that many substances, including metals and natural magnets, showed no attractive forces when rubbed. He noticed that dry weather with north or east wind was the most favorable atmospheric condition for exhibiting electric phenomenon, an observation liable to misconception until the difference between conductor and insulator was understood. And I've got to do this, guys. It's been my custom when I read about some individual, be it a historical figure in whatever discipline, I've got to find out if he was a Christian. It's just an obsession I have. I mean, this is how I began to see this, and it's beautiful as you start to read people you thought might not have been Christians. They may not have been Christians part of their life, and then they became converted. It's just beautiful. So, William Gilbert. Is it William Gilbert? All right, so this is William Gilbert. Let's see. And this is just how my mind works. Okay, this is the guy. A unit of magnetomotive force, also known as magnetic potential, was named Gilbert in his honor. He was educated in St. John College in Cambridge. And William Gilbert. I mean, sadly, some of the guys that were my heroes ended up being atheists. So I'm just going to see if he was a Christian. And there's not much about his Christian faith. Let's see. The contributions of Dr. William Gilbert. I have been haunted through my whole existence by the absurd, wrote Dr. William Gilbert in the introductory chapter of his semi-autobiographical novel, Memoirs of a Cynic. Whoa. He was, okay, so I guess it got published in 1873. He was therefore particularly fond of prosecuting strange and interesting inquiries into the ways and means of public matters. I don't know if this is the same Gilbert. It was said born in 1804. Okay, so maybe it's not the same William Gilbert. Unfortunately, this is a very common name. Gilbert is often considered the father of experimental science because nearly every statement in his book was based on personal observation. Okay, might take a jab. So many claims in evolutionary biology are based on speculation, not personal observation. They seem to equate speculations with facts. That's very problematic. All right, so I'm just going to look, see if it says anything. Now, I found out one guy I would have admired was D. Alembert. I still admire him. Father of the D. Alembertian. He was an atheist. Okay, I don't see anything that mentions his religious faith. Always, this is how you might, honestly, this is how you sometimes find this, is you just kind of Google and you try to look and maybe you stumble on it. Personal physician to King James until his death, William Gilbert. Let's see if there's anything here. Sublunary world. Okay, this was printed in 1600. Hi, Schnoil. I'm just wrapping this up. I'm just looking this up. I'm just wrapping this stream up. The magnetic laws are first generalized and explained by Dr. Gilbert, whose book on magnetism, published in 1600, is one of the finest examples of inductive philosophy that has ever been presented to the world. It is more remarkable because it preceded the Novum Organum of Bacon, in which the inductive method of philosophizing was first explained. William Whewell writes The History of Inductive Sciences. Gilbert repeatedly asserts the paramount value of experiments. He himself, no doubt, acted upon his own precepts, for his work contains all the fundamental facts of science, of magnetism, so fully examined, indeed, that even at this day we have little to add to them. And he says, Gilbert repeatedly asserts the paramount value of experiments. Which is a lot more than I could say for evolutionists who just think their phylogenetic diagrams count as science. It's hilarious. They don't... Their experiments are not very credible, and even the ones that they represent as supporting their theory, when you read the fine print, it actually refutes it, like Linsky's work, The Long-Term Evolution Experiment, where strong selection pressure creates loss of genes, which is really bad, genomic decay. And Schnoil, he says, I miss a lot of your videos lately. Oh, what a nice thing to say. I don't have much time at the moment. Oh, that's fine. Some of the better ones are recorded. I think you might enjoy the one on the main channel about Michael Faraday, especially the last hour. It's an encouragement both for people that are students of science and also Christians in general. It's just a beautiful testimony of someone who loved the Lord with all his heart and who took care of the poor and yet found time to change the world with his invention of the electric generator and contributions to electromagnetic theory. I will insist there's no modern day without Michael Faraday. So I was contrasting him with Charles Darwin, and I think it's just a beautiful story of a Christian man, humble Christian man. It's beautiful. And I'm just now reading about Gilbert. I'm trying to find out if he was a Christian. Oh, so I was just looking here at books by Gilbert, one of the founders of electrical science, and some of the titles that were after they got translated: On the Lodestone, which is a permanent magnet, On the Lodestone and Magnetic Bodies, and That Great Magnet, the Earth, a new physiology demonstrated with many arguments and experiments. And that's an interesting title. So I could not find out whether he was a Christian. No, there's no mention of it. It's not. It doesn't mean he wasn't. It just may be that we don't have any record of it. Let's see. William Gilbert. He rejected Aristotelian philosophy. The current scientific he's a forgotten genius. Galen's medicine and Ptolemy's, the latter placed an immovable earth. In contrast to academic conservatism Gilbert found in London, where he became a physician, a booming center of navigational expertise, technology, and applied mathematics. Also in these circles were Copernicus, who fueled Gilbert's then radical belief that the Earth was just one planet in an infinite universe. Okay, he hypothesized that the Earth is a gigantic magnet. He's correct. All right. Wow. Gilbert credited the Earth with a soul, anima. Having shown that the Earth... I'm sorry, let me make this bigger. Gilbert, having shown that the Earth, which he called Teles, or Mother Earth, has an immaterial magnetic force, Gilbert credited the Earth with a soul, anima, then a common explanation for planets and other self-moving entities. In this view, the Earth's magnetic soul rotated the planet around its axis, which is magnetically stabilized to a point near the pole star. Magnetism, in other words, caused the Earth's Copernican diurnal motion, and that's wrong, but interesting hypothesis. Gilbert hinted in De Magneti and expanded upon in De Mundo. He believed that animate forces of all celestial bodies conspired dynamically to produce the regular but non-circular celestial motions. This first Copernican physics, elaborated in the final book of De Magneti and in De Mundo, was of course superseded some 80 years later by Newton's work on gravitation. Meanwhile, Gilbert's qualitative discussion of magnetostatics is just about complete, carefully based on experiments. He said, the interaction between temperature and magnetism also receives penetrating and accurate discussion in several sections. Wow. Magnetism in lodestones can be eliminated by high temperature. That's incredible. Incredible insight. When considering magnetism, the physicist and polymath William Whewell wrote in 1859, Gilbert's work contains all the fundamental facts of the science, so fully examined indeed that even at this day we have little to add to them. Gilbert's deployment of experiment was deliberate, considered, and groundbreaking. The first sentence of his preface starts, "In the discovery of secret things and the investigation of hidden causes, stronger reasons are obtained from sure experiments and demonstrated arguments than from probable conjectures and the opinions of philosophical speculators of the common sort." I like that. Probable conjectures and opinions of philosophical speculators of the common sort. That's an evolutionary biologist. Well said. I mean, that's what evolutionary biologists are. Probable conjectures, really more like improbable conjectures, and the opinions of philosophical speculators of the common sort. Yeah, well said, baby. The organization of D. Magneti also has a very modern feel. Each topic is introduced by a careful review of previous work followed by an account of new experiments. Gilbert, however, was very much a man of his age and in his mastery of invective. For example, when criticizing claims for magnetic perpetual motion machines, he writes, "May the gods damn all such sham, pilfered, distorted works, which do but muddle the minds of students." Wow! Gilbert's star has, however, fallen in recent decades for several reasons. It is not so fashionable to seek heroic ancestors. Historians, meanwhile, no longer see the scientific era of Gilbert, Kepler, and Galileo as quite so modern, and it is now impossible to dismiss Gilbert's pre-modern hypothesis about the Earth's and other planetary souls as irrelevant to his experiments. And it is now impossible. Okay, but the legacy of his magnetic science is still profound. Just look at De Magnete and judge this sharply written and profoundly innovative work for yourself. Okay. So, in closing, electromagnetic theory has a rich history of development. We would not have the modern day and all of its benefits without electromagnetic theory. We can dispense with evolutionary biology. We cannot dispense with electromagnetic theory and expect the modern world to continue. So, again, I'm just going to take issue with Dr. Chris here saying that evolutionary biology holds a place alongside electromagnetic theory. It's like, no, it's way beneath it. I'm sorry. It's terrible by comparison. It doesn't hold even a flicker of light compared to electromagnetic theory and what electromagnetic theory has meant to science, technology, and the world, the modern world as we know it. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to keep pounding on this, beating a dead horse here because I'm just having fun. It's also an opportunity. I've been trying to emphasize evolutionism is not science. It is more akin to a falsified religion. A falsified religion is a body of beliefs has been falsified but is still believed upon. Okay, so that's how I rate evolutionism. With that, it's great to see Schnoil, and thank you all for all the viewers live and through recording that have joined the show where we celebrate the glories of electromagnetic theory, a very important body of ideas that are important to science in the modern day. I think it's one of the crown jewels, honestly, of modern science. Yeah, and Stroll says, but nylon eating bacteria. So with that, let me see if I can, hopefully I won't disappear when I click this button. 1 second. All right. Okay, we're going to close out with combat. Take care. May the Lord richly bless you, my brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. Have a good day, and you may be interested. I'll be having another stream, my third one today, on molecular biology with Cindy Lincoln. So earlier today was military science and history, and then we had this on electromagnetic history, and then tonight will be on molecular biology. This is feeling like my university days. It's glorious. God bless, and glory and honor to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.